anthropologist from the family of one of the greatest anthropologists of the country, Professor L. Kumar Srivastava. As you know, he passed away this morning. I remember meeting him once in my life and also talking to him once on telephone. But I read his writings. And what impressed me the most about his writings was that he tried to weave anthropological theory with the empirical facts. When I was in my graduation, he came to the Department of Anthropology to deliver lectures on the transformation of tribal society. And today, when I read those lectures, which later on were published in the form of a book also, when I read those lectures, I find that theory was interwoven in the entire text. And this actually gives me a lot of confidence that Indian anthropologists have not been insensitive to theoretical issues. One of the biggest criticisms of Indian anthropologists has been, and it is oft repeated criticism, that Indian anthropologists pay scant attention to theory. And some of the critics of Indian anthropological tradition, some of these critics go to the extent of saying that Indian anthropologists are Asianists or South Asianists or they are Indianists rather than anthropologists, implying thereby that these anthropologists do not actually give attention to theory. Of course, theory is taught, they write books on theory. Mostly these are the textbooks. But when it comes to the interpretation of fact, when it comes to the interpretation of the empirical issues, these anthropologists, they are far away from theoretical tradition. And it is also pointed out that in Indian university, if someone wants to conduct a PhD, someone wants to carry out a PhD on a theoretical topic, he or she is discouraged. And it is said that what you should do is that your work should be fieldwork oriented. Suppose, for example, I want to write a thesis on exchange theory. The university will not permit me. They would rather insist that I go for a long fieldwork and then I write a theory. Now, this kind of a thing has actually paid little attention to the theoretical issue. This does not mean that the Indian anthropologists do not work on theories or do not read the theoretical tradition. And today, that in addition to the Western anthropological theoretical tradition, we also have the indigenous tradition, the Indian anthropological tradition. And I can immediately remember some of the great anthropologists of the country who have contributed in a very significant and a meaningful way to the theoretical issue. And instantly, the name of Professor Andre Vite, who was my PhD supervisor at one point in time, comes to my mind. All his writings were theoretically informed, and theory ran through the entire work, whether it was his the first study, which was an empirical work on a village called Siripuram, and which dealt with the patterns of social stratification in an Indian village. You find the theory going all along. So, therefore, I would refute the first charge that Indian anthropologists are insensitive to theoretical issues. I completely reject this thing. In Indian anthropology, theory is big. But having said this, I find that most of the Indian anthropologists do not take delight in speaking on and about the theoretical issue or writing on theoretical issues. They don't enjoy it. They know that they are aware of the theoretical issue. They know when they are analyzing the data, theoretical issues are coming there in. But when it comes to writing an article, say for example, on power, or an article on exchange, or an article on post structuralism or postmodernism, they actually sit back. And and that is why we find that when it comes to reading of the books on theoretical issues, we go back to the West. And when it comes to reading the books on the empirical issues, we come to India. So this kind of a division of labor has been there, which I think is unfortunate, and we should try to overcome this kind of a thing. Take interest in it. After all, and here I ask a question, and with this, I would like to congratulate the Aspire for organizing an international, seminar or webinar on theoretical issues. That that generally what happens is that theory is given the back seat. But what distinguishes anthropology from other subjects, or what distinguishes anthropology from what is called general studies, or what is called general knowledge, is theory. There are two things which every anthropologist learns. The first is different kinds of theoretical tradition, starting from the evolutionary tradition and coming down to the new theoretical traditions which have been coming up. And the second is that we are reading a lot of information on ethnographic landscapes. I remember in one of the webinars I said that every anthropologist should try to read at least one ethnography every month. So in 1 year, you will be able to read 12 ethnography. And when you have a knowledge of so many situations, you would be able to compare it. Anthropology is a comparative science, and therefore our knowledge of the ethnography, different kinds of situations, should be known to us. Our knowledge should be of these communities. So two things: we do theoretical thing and we do comparative ethnography, and we should try to bring these things together. Anthropology has illuminated a number of ideas, a number of thoughts, and these thoughts have also influenced other disciplines. And some of these thoughts which anthropologists have drawn attention to, they are extremely important and they must be pursued. Now, I would outline some of these basic issues in anthropology, and I think that all anthropologists are aware of these issues and the importance and the significance of these issues. The first one. The first one is the relationship between the individual and society. Or to put it the other way, the relationship between individual and culture. I always remember when I'm talking about this relationship, the famous statement which I read in a book by Sabine on political theory, that there are two great abstractions. There are two great abstractions in social sciences. One is the individual, the other is society. And anthropologists will say the other is culture. Now, we have said time and again that individual is not a monolithic category. We have always argued on the basis of empirical material that each individual is unique. Each individual is a product of a constellation of particular situation. And each individual has its own predicaments, has its own life, has its own problem, and therefore each individual must be seen as unique. Individual is not monolithic category. The individuals are divided into different genders. Individuals are divided into different age groups. Individuals are divided into different strata. Individuals are able-bodied. They are not able-bodied. So these are the kind of differences which come in the individual. That is why anthropologists have argued that even the individual is an important unit of study. Needless to say, we all know one of the greatest contributions of anthropologists have been to, to life histories of individuals. And some of the famous and the fascinating life histories, are about typical individuals of their community, and from the life accounts of these individuals, and and the total, you know, transition of their life, we illuminate the social processes. So we start with the individual, we understand the life of the individual, and try to understand society. Therefore, our accounts of life history are neither biographical nor autobiographical, they are of a different category altogether. So, this relationship between how the individual and societies come into existence. Where is society? When we say society is sui generis, meaning thereby the society makes its own laws, society has its own way of working, something which is above us. An individual is a product of society, and so on and so forth. The question which comes up, if society is sui generis, then how does it change? And this is where we come down to the cybernetic relationship between the individual and society, or individual and culture. And the cybernetic relationship is the relationship between energy and information. So, what is that the society gives us? What is that the culture gives us? Culture and society, they give us knowledge, they give us information. But who puts this knowledge into practice is the individual. An individual, when he or she puts that knowledge into practice, realizes the shortcomings of that practice, realizes the shortcomings of that knowledge. And therefore, because of this dialectical relationship between the individual and society, the change keeps on occurring. Therefore, who is one of the important harbingers of change? That person is, that entity is the individual. So, this is one of the important issues to which we have paid a lot of attention. You can look at this relationship in terms of the other dichotomy, for example, nature and culture, or nature and nurture. You can bring other dichotomies, or say biology and culture. You can bring other things, but the essential thing remains that there is an entity called individual, and this individual has its own characteristics, it has its own social baggages, and this individual, in relationship with the other individual, over a period of time, creates an entity which is called society, which actually controls us. And one of the pleasant puzzles in anthropology has been, how did the society come into existence, and when did the society come into existence? The second thing is where we claim our strength. And I'm sure all these speakers who would be talking after me or later, they would keep this particular thing in mind. And this is actually, we specialize in the study of smaller units. We specialize in understanding the microcosm, in understanding the local, spending a long period of time. Needless to say that we are known in the world of academics for being the creators of field of tradition, and for having contributed significantly to the naturalistic study of the phenomenon. What is called what is called qualitative research. We have contributed to this. We understand a particular situation very well because we spend a long time with the people. Now, it does not mean, and I have tried to dispel this idea in other lectures as well, it doesn't mean that you go and stay with the people for 1 year or for 2 years. It all depends upon you. It all depends upon the resources you have. It all depends upon the time at your disposal. How much time you can spend. When we say that the anthropologist should spend 1 year with the people, we also find examples which go contrary to it. For example, Sir Edward Evans Pritchard spent 9 months with the New Year, only 9 months, and was able to write three brilliant monographs on the New Year, which I advise that irrespective of the changes which have come in anthropology, I advise everyone to read these three monographs. Not only they will tell you how data have to be analyzed, but also they will tell you how, in elegant English, we write the anthropological detail. So we come to know about particular situations. Now the statement is that anthropology is an inductive discipline, which actually means we try to move from particular to general. Or when we use the word form from Redcliffe Brown, the other British anthropologist, we move from ideographic account to nomothetic. And by nomothetic, he means law. Nomo means law, some kind of a law-like account, the generalization. So, how do we generalize from local to the global, or how do we move from particular to general? And here we examine the the usefulness of the comparative method, the method of abstraction. We abstract from one particular case about what could be the phenomena in general, or we carry out a statistical analysis in which we compare different kinds of societies, the different kinds of societies, compare them, and then arrive at some kind of a generalization. The way, as an example, I will give the way in which George Peter Murdoch compared 250 societies of the world on which quality data were available and was able to arrive at two propositions. The first being the universality of the family, and the second being the universality of nuclear family. That was the application of a statistical nomothetic approach. You compare different societies to arrive at the generalization. The second is that you abstract from a given case what could be the general thing. The third issue with which we are concerned in the theoretical realm is the relationship between what is called continuity and what is called change. Continuity and change. Continuity of the society, continuity of the same patterns of living. And how does the change come? We state three propositions in this context. The first proposition, we, the first proposition which we state is change is always occurring. There's a famous statement from Peter Worsley that that change is as much a quality of life, change must is change is as much a fact of life as is its orderly persistence. So change is always occurring. Now there's another thing that we are not able to see the quantum of change because the change may be imperceptible, but it's always taking place. As you know, and I'm sure some people will speak about it that that the criticism of functionalism was that functionalism was not able to account for change. Functionalism provided an account of the society which was almost like a frozen picture, frozen river, something which was fixed. We know how does the society work. We know how parts of the society are interrelated, how this concatenation occurs. But how does it change over a period of time? We do not know. And we will not be able to provide a faithful and holistic account of any society, of any situation, unless we try to bring a relationship between continuity and change and say, and this is proposition number two, that change is occurring at the same time the society is maintaining its continuity. And the third statement which comes is how are we going to study these two things? Yes, we can study what the society is at a particular point in time. Redcliffe Brown said, here and now. What the society is at a point in time when we go and live with the people and observe the way the things are taking place. But how this changes over a length of time, we have to bring in for this analysis historical material. Evans Pitcher was the first one who believed that anthropology is very close to history. He even went to the extent of saying, although some people did not agree with him, that anthropology was a kind of historiography. But there is a very close, very intimate relationship between anthropology and history, and it can be seen in the work of Eric Wolf. In fact, at some point in time in the Aspire, I will be lecturing on the contribution of Eric Wolf and how Eric Wolf has been able to bring a relationship between the synchronic perspective, society as it is point of time, and the diachronic, how it has been changing over a length of time. That is why Anthropologists have time and again they've started working in the archive, started collecting material from the archives, from archaeological department, from the museum, just to bring in the aspect of change. The fourth issue is about the relationship between order and conflict. This is another very important thing. And as you know, that one of the issues which has bothered the anthropologists is that what does conflict do? What kind of a change does conflict bring about? Is conflict ubiquitous? Is conflict found in all kinds of societies? Or is conflict found only in modern societies? Initially, when anthropologists were working on small scale societies, small societies where the normative system was very strong and people never deviated from the structure of norms and the values, we found that the, that the streaks of conflict were less. It was rarely that conflict was in the open. But anthropologists who work these communities, the small communities, they said they said conflict may not be manifest, it may be latent. And therefore, one remembers here the famous statement from Ralph Derendorf that absence of conflict is an abnormality. Conflict is present in all kinds of society. People do not agree on certain points. There are differences of opinion. There are differences with respect to likes and dislikes. And so this proposition is linked up with the first one that each individual is different. Each individual has its own autonomy, and therefore each individual excels in terms of its own propensity, in terms of its own characteristic. Therefore, conflict is there. So how we try to understand these things, and we actually incorporated sometime from the 1930s onward, we incorporated the idea of conflict in our theory. The later brands of evolutionary thinking which came up, they were very sensitive to the idea of conflict. Now comes the fifth and the final issue about which I want to talk. And this pertains to, again, we will go back to the idea number one about the individual, because individual is the point of beginning. And this is the idea about instincts. And here we are bringing in the lessons we have learned from physical anthropology, the instinct. After all, we have a biogenetic substrata, and therefore, instincts, the idea of selfishness that we are concerned about our own thing, the idea of the preservation of the self, or some people go to the extent of saying that there is animalism in us, that we are also animals, something which has come to us as a part of the evolution. Now, in this kind of a situation where we are concerned about the preservation of our own self, where we are concerned about our own fulfillment and the satisfaction of our biological needs. Now, in this kind of situation, the question which comes up, how does morality come? Because if you look at human society, you find if this is the first aspect which pertains to the instinctive structure of human being, the other is the aspect of altruism, morality, the aspect of sacrificing oneself for the sake of others, the aspect of giving it to other rather than taking something which is so specific to human being. So how does it come? How do these two realms operate? And this is one thing which I find very interesting, that we can have perhaps a debate on this thing, that how do the instincts on the one hand and morality and the moral structure on the other hand, how do these things come together? How do these things operate? And human beings emerge as the finest creation of God, where we are having a biogenetic strata, and we are also having a system of morality to which we subscribe. What is good and what is bad? And these times of COVID-19, they are the best moment to see how these things operate together, how these two things work together, our instinctive thing and our morality. Now, these issues have been running through the entire anthropology. Now, needless to say that anthropology is a post-Darwinian discipline. I think we all know it was after the publication of Darwin's origin on the origin of the species that anthropology got a boost. And anthropology, as I have said time and again, anthropology was not concerned with the study of simple society, technologically simple society, or society which came to be called the pre-literate society. Anthropology at that time was concerned with the entire human society. Anthropology was concerned with how human society, human beings, human populations have evolved over a length of time. And thus, the entire 19th century was concerned with two issues. The first issue was that human social behavior can be studied scientifically, and the second was that we have all evolved and and we must find out the processes of evolution and the stages of evolution. But this was something which was common to anthropology. Now we started our journey with with the approach called evolutionism. And today we have come to approaches which are called radical, approaches which are called postmodern, feminist, Marxian anthropology, and so many others. In fact, if you just cover the history of 170 years of anthropology, you will find almost a plethora of approaches which have come up. And these approaches have been bearing different names, different nomenclatures, and you also find that, that these approaches have been borrowed from other disciplines, from sociology, from psychology. They have made a place in anthropology, or the approaches from anthropology went to other disciplines. Functionalism is a very good example, which went to which went to political science and acquired a different shape altogether. So this kind of giving and taking of the anthropological ideas and the theoretical ideas has been going on at this. Now, this scenario of a plethora of approaches, starting with the evolutionary approach, which was of the Darwinian brand, and coming to the recent approaches. And now, as you see, the British anthropology has become very philosophical. If you look at the contemporary British anthropology, what would impress you is that they are taking up the issues of ethics, they are taking up the issues of altruism, they are taking up the issues of goodness, and they are defining these philosophical concepts. And we see such a wide variation. Many of the people who have been following the trajectory of British anthropology, they say that contemporary British anthropology is almost non-recognizable. You just can't recognize it because it is very different from what it used to be. At one time, it was very empirical, empirically grounded, and now it has become very philosophical. And as it has become very philosophical, its prose has become very difficult, and some of these writings may be virtually unreadable. Now, in this scenario, we find a large number of approaches which have come, and I want to share it with you, having taught courses on anthropological theory and sociological theory for all these years in my life. I taught at Delhi University for 41 years and 3 months. And besides teaching at Delhi University, I taught at a large number of places. And if there's anything which I love the most is anthropological sociological theory. Well, I'll tell you reminded of something. You know, my MPhil supervisor, Professor Krishna Prakash Gupta, once asked his supervisor, Professor Talcott Parsons. He asked him that, when you go to bed, what is that you read? He thought perhaps Parsons would say that he would read some novel or newspaper or anything. And Parsons' answer was, well, before going to bed, I read Karl Marx, I read Max Weber. And Parsons called him, some of you would remember, he called him incorrigible theorist. That was in 1939 when he wrote his book called The Structure of Social Action, which he dedicated to his wife and said, to my wife, from an incorrigible theorist, a theorist which cannot be repaired, a theorist which cannot be, who cannot be changed. So that was Parsons' description of himself, that someone who loves theory. So when you are reading theory, you are bound to be perplexed. You are find yourself almost in a labyrinth because there's so many variants of the same thing. And there's so many ideas which in fact are crowding upon you. This actually was found to be the experience of a large number of. That's what happened in 1960s. And this may be interesting to you. In 1960s, when we had a long catalog of the theories, when we had different theories giving different names to their approaches, and it was becoming virtually difficult for anyone to make a distinction, even in small concepts like functional approach, functionalism, structural functional approach, or structural functionalism. So it was really important that we should have a critical look at the theory. Now, see this example which I gave you: functional approach, a structural functional approach, functionalism, structural functionalism. Now, these words are associated with different scholars. For example, structural functionalism is a term which Parsons gave to his own variety of theory. Later on, he changed it to functionalism. A structural functional approach was the term which Redcliffe Brown gave to his approach. Functionalism was what Malinowski thought he was propagating. And functional approach is the general category. And this word functional approach was popularized by Robert Merton, who was an American sociologist. So how one is distinguished from another? What is the focus of one particular approach? And when you come to other things like new ethnography, ethnomethodology, ethnosemantics, ethnoscience, you are bound to be lost, in the forest of confusion. Therefore, in 1960s, the theorists they began with a different question. They said, what are the prominent ideas with which we have been concerned? Right from the post-Darwinian time till the 1960s, what are the various ideas which have fascinated us? And we have tried to build our theoretical approaches around those ideas becoming the pivots. And around those ideas, we have tried to weave our faith. And after much discussion, deliberation on this, they arrived at that all the theories in anthropology, and this applies to sociology as well. But here I am only concerned with anthropology, that all these theories of anthropology, they can be divided into three categories. And each of these categories is built upon a particular idea. Now, the first idea is that human behavior, human accomplishment, whatever the humans have done, whatever they have created, it can be studied scientifically. In the same way as physicists study their phenomena, or as chemists study their phenomena. In the same way, we can study human behavior. So, so the methods from physics, the methods from biology, these methods can be taken and these methods could be used for understanding human, social, and cultural system. That was the first approach. And when you are following this approach, you must follow the way in which science works. Science begins with evidence. So cull out the evidence, excavate the evidence, and then only you will be able to pursue. And do not indulge in any kind of guesswork. As we know that the chief criticism of the classical evolutionism, which was also called 19th century evolutionism, which was also called Victorian evolutionism, the chief criticism of classical evolutionism was that it is nothing but, I'm quoting Malinowski here, is nothing but the limbo of conjectural reconstruction. It is nothing but what Redcliffe Brown said. It is nothing but conjectural history. It is pseudo historical explanation. It is not based on any evidence. It's not based on any fact. And therefore, when evolutionism was revisited in the 1930s or so, when it was revisited and something called neo-evolutionism came up, although some people did not agree with this appellation of neo-evolutionism. Like, for example, Leslie White said that I'm not a neo-evolutionist. What I'm doing is talking about the same idea of evolution. When it came up, it was based on concrete evidence that you bring the facts to pursue it. Therefore, scientific approach was dependent upon empirical fact. It was not based on any kind of intuition or any kind of a thing, which you do as an armchair scholar. Incidentally, the classical evolutionists were called armchair anthropologists because they just sat on their armchair and they thought about the kind of society which was there. So this was a positive approach where the focus was more on the laws, on the discovery of laws, and laws which are similar to the laws with which we come out in natural and biological sciences. And in case today we are not able to come out with the laws of the same type or of the same nature or of the same strength, it is because of we are in infancy. We are gradually coming up. But tomorrow, when we will have a maturation of social sciences, we'll be able to come out with the same laws, the kind of laws you find in natural and biological sciences. And the positivism, as it was called, it found its presentation in structural functional approach. Incidentally, Redcliffe Brown wrote a very famous book, which is hardly read these days, which was called Natural Science of Society, where he tried to argue that we can study society in the same way as we study any other natural natural science. Now, this kind of an approach which came up, which was largely called positivism and had many variants. The structural function approach being one of them, functionalism being the other one, and now it is of course neo-functionalism which has come up. Various approaches which came, they were dealing with a reality which was right out there. This is what these scientists, those who applied the scientific approach to social phenomena, to cultural phenomena, those who call themselves scientists, this is the approach they put forward. That society is right out here. You can go out and you can observe it. You can see it, provided you have the methodology of doing it. The celebrated book which came, which pushed this idea was Emil Durkheim, The Rules of Sociological Method, which actually argued that social facts are things, and these social facts can be studied in the same way as other things are studied. Now, then came the second idea, and around which a number of approaches were built up. And one of the famous approaches built up now this was the approach called interpretive approach. Clifford Geertz is one of the main proponents of this approach. Now, this approach said that you have completely ignored the fact that human beings are not machines. Human beings do not just act as the normative system wants them to act. They are not just robots. On the contrary, human beings, they keep on questioning the normative system. They keep on asking questions about it because human beings have what is called free will. They think, they allocate meaning to their action, why they do what they do. Now, this approach, which actually had its genesis in the philosophical traditions in Germany, Max Weber being one of the main proponents of this, so was Wilhelm Dilthey. So there were many people who were pursuing this. They were saying that how human beings are different from others. They are different in terms of giving meaning to their action. And because of this, there is enormous diversity, enormous diversity in the human behavior. Just take an example for the matter. And this example is really very, very good. And this can help us in understanding. You see, we generally say that we should be careful about spending. We should be careful about our money because money is earned very rational. But then you come across the big Indian fat weddings. Of course, now post Corona, I do not know what will be the fate of these big weddings. And now the question comes that when we know that money is earned with great work, why do we spend so much when things can be done as frugally as possible? Then why is it that we spend so much? Why the gift giving? Why the gift giving? You know, happens to be a very conspicuous kind of a phenomenon. Why do we do that? Come back to some of the traditional society. We all know about the performances called potlatch. They were observed in British Columbia. A large number of these communities observed potlatch, in which the valuables were destroyed. And eventually, after the performance of potlatch, the person who had thrown the feast became a pauper. He, in fact, was dependent upon others for his survival. But the money, the wealth, whatever he had was spent. You can take example for the big feasts of merit, which were in the northeastern part of the country, especially with the Nagas. You come across a number of communities. Maurice Godelier wrote on these things, where we spend our wealth for gaining what is called status, for becoming big men, for gaining in terms of esteem. So after Potlash, I become a poor man. I live on penury. But what is that I have gained? I have gained in terms of my status. After giving the feast of merit, I may become a poor man, but after that, I am able to put the horn of the animal called Mithun on the top of my hut, which gives me status, and I become the elder of the village, what is called Gaumura. I gain in terms of status. Now, this is something which is very important. And some of us may be knowing that Thorstein Veblen called it conspicuous consumption. That we conspicuously we consume this in order to gain status. Now, we are becoming non-rational. We are not becoming irrational. We are becoming non-rational to gain in terms of status. Therefore, human behavior is located in meaning. And when we are pursuing our study, what is that we have to find out is the meaning people give to their action. People people perform certain things and they know why are they doing it. And how will you come to know why are they doing it? When we carry out the qualitative ethnographic work. And in fact, you can easily see that I can carry out a positivistic study conducting survey research, and I carry out an interpretive study by conducting field work. So come to the second approach, which is concerned with meaning people give to their action. This approach came to be known as the interpretive approach, which became very popular in the 20th century, early 20th century, and in the second half of the 20th century, it became very popular. And so many variants of this approach came up, whether it was active methodology or it was interpretive approach or hermeneutic approach. All these approaches, they can all be classified under what is called the meaning, pursuits of human being. Now, then comes the third and the final thing, the final approach, which actually was empirically grounded, like the positivistic approach, that you must look into the empirical facts. And at the same time, it took into the idea of social construction. Human beings constitute the society. They construct the society. Society is not right out there. The society is continuously, this is being constructed by us, and we are giving it a meaning. And we are also changing it, changing the contour of society. This approach asked three questions. The first question this approach asked, and later on I will give you the term by which this approach is identified. The first question it asked was, after all, what is the objective of anthropological work? Why are we carrying out this work? What kind of a value gain this this work is giving to human society? What is it we are contributing? Are we only concerned with the understanding, or are we making some contribution towards the amelioration, towards the amelioration of human condition? Number one. Number two, are we representing the perspectives of all these strata of society? We have been saying time and again that society is not a homogeneous category. We are saying time and again that there are gender relations, there are people of different age group, we are saying there are different strata, we are saying there are people of different ability. So society itself is divided into different perspectives. And all these perspectives, as in the case of a collage, these perspectives are juxtaposed. If it is so, then whose point of view are we understanding? Are we understanding all the points of view? Are we representing all the points of view? Or are we representing certain points of view and not the other points of view? Number three, the third question was that, that in this kind of an understanding, shouldn't we say that certain perspectives are right and certain perspectives are false? Now, this brings us to what is called the value commitment, not value freedom. The first approach was, the positivistic approach was value free. The first approach was value neutral. It was based on the notion of objectivity. And objectivity had two thoughts here. Number one, describe the phenomenon as it is. And number two, do not allow your own values, your own commitment, your own likes and dislikes, your own preferences to come in. So, two things, you have to keep your own understanding away from this. Now, the third perspective are that shouldn't we value committed? Shouldn't we take care of the people who are going to be benefited by by this? Shouldn't we say that some perspectives are, I'm repeating, some perspectives are false and some perspectives are correct? Now, come to this kind of an approach, which actually has come to be known as critical approach. So the first is the positive approach, the second is the interpretive approach, and third is the critical approach, in which we place radical humanism, we place Marxian anthropology, we place feminist methodology, we place environmental conservatism, we place all those approaches which are beginning with a critical standpoint. And often people who follow these approaches, they are not tired of quoting Karl Marx's famous statement, and the quote, philosophers have interpreted the world in many ways. The point, however, is to change it. That what should be the aim of social sciences? That we should try to change it. We should try to bring about a positive change. We should improve upon the condition of people. We should ameliorate the condition of people. The critical approach further says, and there can't be a better example than from the feminist standpoint. It further says that perhaps in our own analysis, we have missed out the perspectives of some and brought in the perspectives of others. We know the example of the studies of caste system, the studies of villages. It is very well known that many of the anthropologists have said time and again that when they were carrying out their fieldwork in a village, they were able to speak to certain sections of the village and not to certain other sections because of the prevalence of the rules of purity and pollution. The famous example is Professor Andre Bete's caste, class, and power. And they have themselves pointed out that there were certain groups they were able to speak and certain groups they were not able to speak. Come down to the studies of underquote mental asylum because they are no more called mental asylum, they are called psychiatric clinic. Now, study of the mental asylum, where when the studies were carried out, whose point of view were we putting forth? We were putting forth the point of view of the doctor, the point of view of the administrator, whom we interviewed. But perhaps we were not allowed to have an interaction with those who were mentally challenged, or those who had behavioral disorder. They were out of gaze. As Goffman said, we did not see the back view. We only saw the front view, what was presented. And this applies to many other institutions which Goffman called under quote total institution, where we were able to study certain aspects and not the other aspects. For example, the studies of the prison, for example, the studies of the boarding houses, for example, the studies of the nunneries or the monasteries or the schools, where we studied the points of view of those who are in power and not the other. That is why Howard Becker wrote a famous article, which I advise everyone to look into, is whose side are we on? Whose perspective are we representing? Many of Indian anthropologists who have worked in societies which are sexually segregated, they have said that they were able to speak to only men and not to women because speaking to women was not considered a proper thing. Therefore, they spoke to men, and these men, the local men, they suggested to them that whatever they tell about women is the right thing. I mean, there is no need to speak to women. So this kind of a partial understanding which came. So you are studying men, you are speaking to men, and you think the male point of view is a society's point of view, something which is called in anthropology androcentric perspective from the point of view of men. And when feminism started coming up, or what was earlier called anthropology of women, started coming up in 1970, this was the point of view that we have, completely ignored the one half of the humanity. So you find here certain things being represented, certain other things not being represented. Incidentally, here I would like to tell you that some female anthropologists have said that by contrast to male anthropologists, they are far more privileged because female anthropologists have been able to speak to men and women both, whereas male anthropologists have been able to speak to only men and not women. Margaret Mead said that female anthropologists do much better than male anthropologists because they are able to have a larger understanding of society by talking to various people, the cross sections of people. Now, coming to the third aspect, that whose perspective is the right one? the issue of what is true and what is false. Marxism use the term false consciousness. The biggest criticism of the critical approach was the biggest criticism was that that we have considered all perspectives as right perspective. Critical approach says interpretive approach thinks all perspectives are right perspectives, whereas critical approach would say no, you have to look critically at the way in which human beings try to construct the reality and make a distinction between what is true and what is not true. So you have now, Bodhi, I'm coming to the final part, a few more minutes, that we now have three categories: the positivistic category, the interpretive approaches, and the critical approaches. You can locate the approaches with which you are dealing in one or the other thing. I think this approach is a little advancement over the other because it did not begin with the nomenclature. It actually began with the idea that what are the ideas with which we are concerned. If we say that all phenomena can be measured, so we have one approach. When we say no, we have to ask people the meaning they give. Now we have to look for the actor's point of view, what in anthropology is called emic point of view. So we are moving into the interpretive approach. And when we say no, we have to take up a critical view of the whole thing. And we have to think in terms of the way in which anthropology can contribute to the, the change in society or improving upon the condition of society. Now, the last question which comes here, which I'm sure all the students are going to ask me or are they going to ask their teacher, and this is one of the most frustrating aspects in research when students come and ask you, sir, which theory should I use? My work is not theoretically informed. I don't know which theory would suit my work. And most of the supervisors I have seen, they do not give an unambiguous answer to these things. And so eventually what happens that the thesis remains nothing but a kind of an empirical account. Now, this is an important question that which theoretical perspective should I use? There are two answers to this. The first answer is the theoretical perspective which you use will depend upon the institution where you are trained. The institution may specialize in pursuing a particular point of view. Let us say the point of view of cultural materialism, or another institution may specialize in furthering the point of view of hermeneutic inquiry. Okay, because it believes that anthropology is a kind of literature. The first believes that anthropology is dealing with the matter which exists independently of consciousness, the Marxian point of view. So you have the institution will play a very important role. In fact, at the PhD level, the role of the supervisor is very important here. Number two, you look at the constellation of facts which you have collected and then ask the question, which theoretical perspective will help me most in understanding these kinds of facts. If suppose, for example, I'm working on poverty, I have to look for certain approaches which can help us in understanding this. Therefore, you have to think in terms of which theoretical perspective will help you in illuminating your understanding. So you have, at the end of the day, you have an understanding of a myriad of theoretical perspectives. You also have an understanding of a large number of society because you have read comparative ethnography, and then you deal with this thing, keeping in mind the idea that anthropology is principally a theoretical discipline, and anthropology helps us in knowing ourselves through the other. We try to know ourselves, we come to know the understanding of our own culture, but our root is going to the other, and from other we return to the self. But this journey from self to the other and from other to the self, this journey is facilitated and mediated by theoretical tradition. Therefore, I will urge upon all of you that take interest in theory, and I wish the international seminar on theory success because I see a large number of presentations are going to be made, and some of the presentations are about some of the seminal concepts. For example, someone is going to speak on culture, and let us see what are the kinds of ideas with which anthropologists have dealt with, or gender, or environment. Thus, I wish you all the best, and I will be looking forward to learning from all of you. Thank you very
Thank you so much, sir. It was an enlightened talk, and I would like to give the charge to Maluvan sir if he is there. Maluvan sir?
Yes, yes, yes. I'm
Yes.
here. I'm here.
So,
Okay.
yeah, you can take up the charge.
Um, First of all, I would like to thank Professor Vinay Kumar Srivastava, Director, Anthropological Survey of India, the eminent professor of Delhi University, and to deliver who delivered a wonderful keynote address about our international workshop on anthropological theory and practice, past and present. Really, with your keynote address, we really enlightened. Uh, because I don't have any words to express myself because it's really wonderful. I hope all enjoyed and enlightened with your lecture. Uh, So thank you very much, Professor. Thank you. Actually, whenever I approach Professor Vinay Kumar Srivastava sir, he used to guide us as his own child. As per it's your product, sir. Please guide us as usual as always. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you. Now, it's my great pleasure to invite